What are we talking about in this video today? Well, we're going to start by looking at the ESRS matters to disclosure mapping problem. What is this problem? Then we're going to talk about how EFRAG have recently addressed this problem. I'm going to then give you some sort of thoughts and opinions as a sustainability professional, and then I'm going to give a sort of a second opinion as a provider of software which is designed to help sustainability professionals. So let's get straight in with the first point on this little list, the problem of the matters to disclosure mapping. Zooming out to the overall ESRS reporting process, we have two main sub-processes or sub-activities. The first being materiality, and this is the phase of determining the scope of what will be reported. And then we have the phase which involves the collation and the preparation of the report itself or the reported information, and that we can call the reporting phase. Inside the reporting phase, we have all of the topics, and the topics have these disclosure requirements. And when you look into the disclosure requirements, you see that there are lots and lots of various different pieces of information which are specified for reporting. During the double materiality phase, we have a list of sustainability matters. And the list is quite extensive, and the list is sorted into the same sets of topics as the standards. And the double materiality process tells us to identify those matters which are material and should be reported. And the matters, as we know, can be material from either the impact perspective or the financial perspective, or both. And here is where the existing standards have this quality of life / process gap, is that the specific disclosure requirements or the specific lists of information and data that must be reported is only grouped at the topic level. It's only mapped at the topic level. There is no explicit mapping of that information to the sustainability matters. It becomes somewhat problematic when you have a topic that includes a large number of sustainability matters, and it may be the case that very few of them are material for a specific company. When you come then to the reporting side and you open up the relevant topic, it is not clear immediately exactly which disclosure requirements are relevant to those matters. And so this then is the matters to disclosure requirement reporting problem, or the mapping problem. This problem has been described by other people in different ways. It has been acknowledged by EFRAG as an issue for comprehension and for process. And in my opinion, this is a sort of quality of life issue. So let's look at how EFRAG have further clarified this in their recent ID 177 paper. Here is the very recent document from the EFRAG Secretariat, the ID 177 paper, as I'm calling it. And this is discussing the links between the sustainability matters, that is what AR 16 is a reference to, that is Application Requirement 16, which tells us what the matters are, and the disclosure requirements. It is the attempt to provide the mapping that has been missing. Now, whilst that is the case, I want to just go to the first few pages of this because it is very important to understand that this concept of exercising judgment is still part of the guidance. The mapping should not automatically make the decisions for us. That is very important. So let's have a look at that. Right at the start of the paper, in the first paragraph of the response, EFRAG have reiterated, judgment is required to determine the information which is to be included in the sustainability statement. judgment is still required. So first identify the matters that are material, and once the matters have been identified, you should assess the materiality of the information that you will report based on judgment. Now, there are some criteria for making those judgments, but it is still a matter of judgment. I'm going to skip forward in this paper just so we can see another perspective of the same point iterated slightly differently. There is a disclaimer or a set of disclaimers, and paragraph 16 is quite important here. The mapping in this document does not imply any automatism. This is a very important statement to make. Just because the sustainability matters have been mapped to certain disclosure requirements that are relevant does not mean that this is an automated filtering process. You cannot use this mapping to automatically filter out disclosure information. So that is very important, particularly for software providers. We'll come to that later, is this mapping should not be used to automatically disable reporting requirements. This paragraph once again iterates that judgment must be exercised to determine the disclosure requirement and data points to be disclosed. Okay? So once again, even in light of the mapping, judgment is still the basis for determining whether or not information will be included. I know certain people are really going to hate this concept, the concepts of exercising judgment and fair representation and reasonableness. A lot of people struggle with those concepts, but I think sustainability professionals should be used to this kind of thing. We should understand what practicability is, what exercising judgment means, what fair representation is, and what reasonableness are, and we should be able to exercise those things as professionals. A couple more points then on this document before we jump to the mapping itself. Quick note here, the mapping, this is paragraph 12, the mapping of AR16, so the mapping of sustainability matters with disclosure requirements does not link to specific data points, right? This mapping does not go all the way down to the granularity of data points. It is mostly at the disclosure requirement level. This is quite important for metrics because it's not filtering out every single metric. It is not doing that. It is going to the disclosure requirement level and it is providing guidance for the judgments. Quickly then, one last addition. This is, let's say, reiterating that last point for metrics. There is no systematic one-to-one relationship between the matters and the metric disclosure requirements, okay? So this is important to note that not only does this document not provide a systematic one-to-one relationship between the matters and the metrics, there is no systematic relationship. That is a statement of fact. That relationship does not exist. So this is really relevant, I think, for software providers, that providing a filter that disables or enables individual metrics is contrary to the opinion of EFRAG. There is no systematic one-to-one relationship between a sustainability matter and the metrics. Okay, so that's now kind of covered some of these really critical, important things, I think, in this document. Let's jump ahead and see the mapping itself, and I'll provide a little interpretation of the mapping, and then we'll move on to the next topics. Here we are then, looking at ESRS E1, the climate change topic. What we have then in this document is a table. And on the left-hand side, you can see obviously the topic there, climate change, and we can see the subtopic, or the first of the sustainability matters. And these coming from AR16, the topic and the subtopic. Then we have the list of the disclosure requirements which are relevant. So we can see that E1.1 here is considered relevant for climate change mitigation. And there's an explanation of the information that is included in that disclosure requirement. And then on the right-hand side, we start seeing the opinion or the explanatory notes which are important. So here we see that a transition plan relates to climate change mitigation. So this is how we work this through. If this sustainability matter here is material, then E1.1 or E11 is relevant, And the information we are looking to report, if that sustainability matter is material, is how the transition plan relates to climate change mitigation. That is the information about the transition plan, which I would be writing in my E11 disclosure if climate change mitigation was a material sustainability matter. I'm going to skip forward to E19 here, because E19 then provides us a little bit more information. So E19 is also relevant, if climate change mitigation is material. And there is the information that E19 is concerned with. And over here we see something interesting. First of all, that under E19, if the matter is material, I would be looking to report information relating to the anticipated financial effects from material climate-related transition risks and potential climate-related opportunities. So that sets the scope of the information I would be providing. Then, only if the matter is financially material. So if climate change mitigation is only material from an impact perspective and was not material from a financial perspective, then E19 is arguably not relevant, or the information I would write here would not be relevant, because EFRAG have suggested that the information required for E19 is about financial materiality, which makes sense because when you read the disclosure requirement, it is all focused on financial effects, which is financial materiality. So what EFRAG is doing here is they are providing some of those interpretive tools that we need to now exercise our judgment. Before this document was released, as a sustainability professional, we would have read through E19 and we would have had to make this connection ourselves. We would have read through it and we're saying, okay, everything that E19 is talking about appears to relate to financial effects. Therefore, it must be largely concerned with financial materiality. And that is now confirmed by EFRAG that if the matter is financially material, then this information is relevant. This is repeated again and again then throughout this document. We can see the second sustainability matter here. There is a shorter list of disclosure requirements which are relevant. So you can see E15 is not there, E16 is not there, E17 is not there. So if this matter was material, there are fewer relevant disclosure requirements. And then the guidance or the judgment assistance over here on the right-hand side is adapted slightly and changed slightly. So that is how EFRAG have done this mapping for us. I think this is a really nice step. And now I'm going to talk about this, in my opinion, as a sustainability professional. And then we'll move on and talk about it from the perspective of someone who's providing software tools to assist with reporting. So as a sustainability professional, the concept that judgment is required to determine the information that should be reported in a sustainability statement is entirely acceptable as it was already. I am of the opinion that a competent and experienced sustainability professional should be able to make the connection themselves between the information that is required in the standard and their sustainability matters. We have some guidelines in Appendix B to ESRS 1, namely the concept of relevance. Sustainability information is relevant when it may make a difference in the decision of users under double materiality approach. So there we go. Double materiality, the materiality sets all of the sustainability matters, which are material, and then the information which is relevant is information which may make a decision difference. So for me, as a sustainability professional, whilst the process may be rather time-consuming, it should be entirely possible, based on experience, based on professional skill, based on a close reading of the content, and based on understanding my organisation, for me to go through, once my matters are material, to go through the disclosure requirements and make those judgments. However, I understand that this is not a reality everywhere for a number of reasons. And the first part is that because ESRS standard is new, and because the regulatory requirements for reporting sustainability information are new, it is that there is a large influx of new reporting companies and new people who are taking on this task. They simply do not have the experience, and I don't want to sound kind of condescending here, but it is, I think, a reality, simply do not have the experience and the professional skill to make those judgments, and they need this assistance. They need someone to go through and do this mapping to assist them with making those judgments. So that is fully understood, but I do think that this is not a necessary thing. The ESRS does not need to have necessarily done the mapping. What I do think the ESRS could have done is be much more explicit about this need for judgment. And the word judgment and the phrase exercising judgment, I think should have been included in the ESRS and should not have been delayed. We should not have had to have waited until a guidance paper came along to explicitly start using those terms. Exercise judgment in order to make that connection yourself. I think there was, and has been unto this point, the expectation that actually there was some mapping already, that mapping had occurred, and it should be obvious which sustainability matters relate to which individual data points. So I think there's been a bit of a communication, I might not go so far as to say failure, but there has been a bit of a communication problem from the standard and from the drafters of the standard that this problem or this potential quality of life issue wasn't foreseen and wasn't written into the standard itself early. However, it's not too big a problem because obviously the first required reports are not being published yet. We still have time, and the guidance paper has now gone quite some way towards plugging this gap. So to summarize then, my sort of opinion as a professional, having this mapping is not necessary, and we should be able to make those judgments. As sustainability professionals, that is part of our skill set, is to make judgments about what is my company doing, what information do I have, what is relevant, what is sustainability relevant, what kind of information do decision makers need, and to go through that process myself and make those judgments. So that is a skill I think we should all have, and we should all work towards being able to do that. Secondly, though, recognizing the market situation, having this mapping will be helpful, and that is why I'm kind of talking about this and using this phrase quality of life. This is what I would call a QOL update from EFRAG. This will help us all. So let's move on then now to my opinion as a software provider, and can actually show you how we're starting to implement this into our software whilst avoiding some of the potential pitfalls of taking this too far. As the provider then of software which is aimed to make ESRS reporting more convenient, I've got a few slightly different thoughts on the ID 177 paper and the mapping, and how we've actually decided to implement this to make it user-friendly and to take those quality of life improvements from EFRAG and bring them into the process in a slightly more formal way. Here is the reporting module of our software, and we're looking here inside the climate topic, and this is E11, the disclosure which requires the reporting of information relating to a transition plan for climate change. And of course we have this number of child requirements. These are the disclosures broken down into further detail. What we've done then is at the parent level, at the disclosure level, we've included now in our framework guidance a reference to the material from ID 177 here. And we've now paraphrased EFRAG's notes from the document. So in this case here, we can see that we have drawn on support provided by EFRAG in their document, and that the following information in this disclosure requirement is most relevant to the sustainability matter identified below. And here we have identified the single sustainability matter which EFRAG have suggested is most relevant to this disclosure requirement, and then we've included the perspective information. So this information is relevant whether the matter is material from an impact perspective or from a financial perspective. We've been very careful to mention every time that the preparer's own judgment should be exercised with regard to the inclusion or exclusion of any sustainability information. We are not implementing this as an automated filter of every disclosure and sub-disclosure, let's say, or child disclosure. So we are certainly keeping in mind the guidance that suggests that judgment is required, but we are including these notes from EFRAG as a reminder to those who are using our software that this guidance exists and summarizing it for them. I'll show you one or two other examples so you can see how this is played out with slightly different context and with slightly different information. E12 here is a good example where the guidance from the EFRAG document is a bit more extensive. So here we can see that they have mapped 3 matters to this disclosure requirement: climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation, and energy. And in each case, these matters are relevant whether they are material from an impact or financial perspective, so it's the same as before. And then we've got some further qualification about the nature of the information that would be reported here. So we have stated, insofar as the information covers policies which pertain to climate change mitigation, which is rather obvious because that is what the disclosure requirement is asking for, but it's good to see it mapped out explicitly in relation to the sustainability matters. The last example then is E19, and here we also have 3 sustainability matters which are relevant to this disclosure requirement and the information that should be reported. But in this case, EFRAG tells us that it is only relevant if the matter is material from the financial perspective. So if there are matters under climate change which are only relevant from an impact perspective, then there will be a low probability of relevant information that needs to be reported. You still need to exercise judgment. This does not automatically say no information should be reported, but it certainly gives you a very strong reason to exercise judgment to say that this is not relevant. The sustainability matter is material, but it is only material from an impact perspective. I have no relevant information to report under this disclosure requirement. So that is the first way we've implemented the guidance. It is already available in the software. We do have a few little tricks up our sleeves for how we can further implement this and make it a bit less text heavy and a bit more user friendly, but that will come in due time. And we will be very careful not to automate the disclosure information availability. So that is consistent with what EFRAG is saying, that these mappings are not to be taken as automated scoping of information. That brings us to then the conclusion of this video. To summarize, I guess I would say that this is a really welcome paper from EFRAG. I know there are loads of people who have been asking for this very kind of thing, some more detailed mapping of matters to disclosure requirement information. So thanks to EFRAG for responding to people's needs and getting this published. And I hope this video is a little bit informative, just walking you through what we think it means and how it can be implemented.